burial customs and rituals have varied throughout the ages. Today, the dead are kept in cemeteries, usually near the outskirts of town. This is a direct result of the industrial age of the 18th century. Massive population spikes, outbreaks of infectious diseases, and overcrowding were all factors in keeping death at arm's length.
The general tendency is the dead have their place, the living have theirs, and the two are more or less separate.
Separating life from death was not always the norm. Around 800 AD, the dead were kept much closer to home. Bodies were buried in the center of town on land connected to churches. Single plots, headstones, and the spread of Christianity throughout Western Europe marked the beginning of modern burial techniques. These small fields became known as graveyards. But in 8000 BC, our relationship with the dead was far more intimate. Çatalhöyük is considered to be the world's oldest settlement. In this Neolithic city, the body was removed of its flesh, wrapped in cloth, and buried beneath the beds of the living. People would literally eat, sleep, and socialize above the body of their dead relative.
It was the place where people sat, where people visited. And what better place than to honor by putting a beloved deceased under the bed, which is one of the central places of social activity in a village house.
This is kind of the birth of civilization. So to realize that people at that time were living with their dead in the sense of actually burying them under the floor of their houses, this is kind of a shock for some people because it seems like a very strange practice to us today.
This interaction of life and death is a form of ancestor worship.
What it tends to mean is that the dead person is assumed to play a role in modern society, that they have some kind of power, that they can exert an influence over your life.
Çatalhöyük brought one of the first attempts to bring the dead into life and how to treat death. As such, it served as a model for other cultures.
Around the same time in ancient Jericho, burial rituals also brought the body into the home post-mortem.
In some cases in this area as well, though, you've got headless bodies. What they would do with those skulls is they would take them, they would plaster them over, they would put shells over the eyes, and they would keep those also in the home, probably in a more accessible location where they could be seen, admired, possibly talked to, otherwise engage in social life.
Çatalhöyük, like Jericho, shared similar views of the dead. Death did not disrupt the dialogue with the living. Therefore, the death should not be pushed out to the peripheral, but should be part of an ongoing family line.
The actual definition of death shifts from place to place and time to time. So we in the modern West have a moment of death that we identify, and that is when the breath leaves the body, when the signals on the monitor go flat. That's the moment of death. But that doesn't work that way for everybody.
Grandmother, I have brought you food and wine to enjoy.
On the island of Sulawesi, Indonesia, live the indigenous people of Town of Torja. Torajans reside in unique boat-shaped homes called tongkogans, modeled after the first structure built in Torajan heaven. Tongkogans specifically face north to align people's souls with their creator. Toraja is known as the town of the living dead. When you die here, you are not considered truly dead, but sick.
Traditionally, it is believed that the soul leaves the body via the head. The dead person is still considered to be in the world of the living. These dead persons are treated just like the living human beings.
When death occurs, the deceased are not buried, but kept inside the home. It is not uncommon to live with a corpse for a year or two, while one Torajan family kept a body inside for 2 decades. For all this time, relatives regard the body as a shrine. They place a white flag outside the house to warn villagers that a body resides there.
This dead person is my grandmother, and she has been dead in the house for 1 month. I give offerings to the dead person 3 times a day. And when family comes to visit, we cook and offer her food. Grandmother, I have brought you food and wine to enjoy. When she first died, we bathed the body and injected it with formalin. That's why the body has stayed preserved. Before the funeral sacrifices, we will bathe her again. There is a plan. There will be a funeral in about a year from now. My grandmother will stay with us until then.
A lavish funeral is the only way to free the soul and usher it into the afterlife. However, planning a Torajan funeral can often take months, even years. Family members all must agree on a date. Funds must be raised, and temporary housing must be built to accommodate hundreds of guests.
Another reason why we keep the body at home for a long time, so that people have time and collect money to afford to buy a buffalo.
In Toraja, some funerals cost up to $5,000. This in a country where the average annual salary is $700. Buffalo play an important role in transitioning the soul into the next world. Heaven is called Puya, which means the land of souls. The spirit of the dead ride the buffalo into the afterlife. Once in heaven, the soul receives all the sacrifices given to it. The more sacrifices made at the funeral, the richer the ancestor will be in the next world.
This is the Badong dance performance. It's a chant for the deceased that narrates the life cycle of the dead person.
On the last day of the ceremony, the body is brought here to the cliff graves. The bones of hundreds of Torajans lie here.
Right in front of us, you see the stone graves, which belong to a nobleman of this area. On the balcony, we see the effigies. These effigies are made to replace the real bodies of the dead person. The spirits are manifested in the effigies sometimes. Toraja is one of the most unique culture, especially when we talk about death culture. I myself, when I die, I would like to die like Torajan die. It's a beautiful way to die.